Hello and welcome to the latest of my deep dive videos. Today I'm going to explore the arrival and the impact of the mighty Saturn in the sign of Pisces from the 7th of March 2023. Saturn's going to be here for an initial 2 years and 2 months before returning to the sign of Pisces from September through to the end of November, also in 2025. Before moving on to a longer presence in Aries. So what I want to do is just share how I'm going to structure this video. What does Saturn represent? What's the mythology behind this sign? What are its strengths for us? What are its less pleasant influences? I feel there is a kind of prevailing view, certainly on YouTube, that Saturn is the innately bad guy and that Jupiter is the wonderful good guy. I personally don't agree with that. I don't think it's that binary. So I want to go through that with you. Also, when this event occurs, what do the planets tell us outside of the arrival of Saturn in Pisces? Because that event chart is likely to inform what we can expect from this particular journey of Saturn through Pisces, the first for 27 years. So we really need to understand that, and I will look at that in terms of Placidus, so the technical astrology, but also in terms of the solar astrology, so we can all relate to what the impact collectively is going to be. But what benefits is Saturn going to bring in the sign of Pisces? Because I've written out quite a list, and also what challenges. A bit of a list there too, and then I'm going to go through each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces and explain how I feel Saturn's presence in Pisces will impact on each. And you can watch those in terms of your sun or your ascendant, or both if you choose. The choice is yours. Now, if you're a returning visitor, thank you so much for joining me once more. If you're new to my channel, it's great to have you with me. Any comments you have, please share them. I interact with all comments. This is very much a community, and please like or subscribe. Now, if you would like to understand what the next 12 months will hold for you as an individual, if you give me 3 pieces of your personal birth data of time, date and place of birth, I can give you your forecast, but also in my special package of 30% off, your life roadmap report. This can help you to understand the strengths that you have and work with them more fulsomely, but also understand some of the repetitive patterns we all have, which can be tricky, but getting a more intimate understanding can help you to prosper in life. Now, if you see beneath, you can see the form for that in the link, but if you order that, you can also get free a Zodiac Forecast for 23, your Chinese and Vedic forecast free too. So let's explore what Saturn into Pisces means. Well, Pisces is the 12th zodiac sign, so this is very much a cumulative position of all the experiences of the previous 11 signs. Zodiac means circle of animals, and obviously the sign of Pisces is the fishes, 2, one going each way. And I think that's really interesting because this is a sign with 2 rulers. Jupiter, the traditional ruler, very much about faith, spirituality, growth, and understanding our higher purpose. Whereas Neptune, the ruler of the sea, is very much to do with the ethereal, what we can't quite see, but we can sense, our instincts. And that's very important to understand the energy of Pisces, because Pisces can be incredibly imaginative, super compassionate, very, very giving. But for me, it can also have a coldness that comes from almost like a detachment when it just gives too much. So we need to understand, with the planet of cool or cold arriving in this sign, what that impact is likely to be. So first up, let's just get the time frames really reiterated. So arrival on March the 7th. There's going to be a retrograde which begins on the 17th of June, and that's going to go on to the 4th of November. But Saturn then goes into Aries in phase 1 in May the 25th, 2025, and then it goes into a retrograde on July the 13th. Now, Saturn in Pisces phase 2, as I mentioned before, is September, October and November 2025. And then on November the 28th, it goes direct in the sign of Pisces from that retrograde and moves more fully into Aries for the following 2.25 years on February the 14th, 2026. So that just gives you a little bit of an idea of the timeline. But what about the myth? Well, in Greek mythology, Saturn was known as Kronos. And if we think about Kronos, chronology, the chronicle, the measurement of time, so old father time. So Saturn is innately linked to time, but also wisdom. And I think the wisdom bit gets really forgotten because the perception is that Saturn is all about limitation, all about boundaries, all about coldness and harshness. And of course, all of that can indubitably be so about the planet Saturn. But Saturn is also about agriculture. It's also about periodic renewal. And if we think about it, sometimes things have to sort of, like the grapes, they need to die off on the vine and then be cut in order for the new growth to come through. So Saturn can be to do with dissolution, and that's really interesting, that word, because in the sign of Pisces, obviously things can get washed away, but Saturn can generate good things. So let's think about what the benefits could be of Saturn's arrival in the sign of Pisces. That great link to water, the element of the sign is water. It's also a mutable quality, so very flexing. But the stability of Saturn, very much to do with structures, routines and discipline. People who have Saturn in Pisces in their natal chart can sometimes find that they are a font of wisdom to support other people, but energy, physical energy, can seem limited at times. But what I feel we're going to see over the next 2.5 years is a lot of new technologies that are going to be to do with trying to clean up our waterways. We're going to see more desalination plants where we take the water from the sea, get rid of the salt and convert it into clean water. We're also going to see more hydropower because obviously the push towards renewables is getting stronger. Ukrainian war has obviously brought a bit of a jarring halt and some sudden reactive changes of plans around coal pits in Germany and also Britain. But the direction of travel is going to be much more to do with renewables. Also look out for hydrogen powered cars and planes. So that's another exciting technology that I feel that Saturn will drive forwards in Pisces. I think there's going to be a pushback, and this is just a personal view, on the number of sea cruises that people go on. Now that sector has become enormously popular, and so I'm probably in some ways risking offending someone, but I can only be truthful to myself. I feel that sea cruises are not great for the environment, and to me, in terms of an environmental experience, being crushed together on this huge, rather unusually constructed ship, which pings out all those particulates from the chimneys as they sail from port to port, is not my idea of fun, to be honest. But I feel that that popularity is actually going to decline. We're also going to see stricter regulation of merchant shipping because we have vessels turning off tracking software in order to evade detection, particularly if they're distributing products from states that are not part of the free trading market. So expect more regulation because, of course, Saturn can be censorious. Also, I think there's going to be a fiercer imposition of sea checks on shipping. A lot to do with perhaps trying to limit the distribution of people in a way which is for money, for profit, but also for narcotics. I think there, however, will be enormous opportunities for us all to work on our mental health. We all have a mental health. Some days it's pretty good, some days it may be challenged. Sometimes we may go through periods where it's a much more serious situation. I think for us all, talking about how we feel has become much more in vogue. But actually having the opportunity to talk how we feel in our everyday existences when we're not a celebrity or a royal, it's not always an easy thing to do. So I feel that Saturn is going to try to support that. And I think one of the things that's going to really grow in popularity during Saturn's journey through Pisces is counselling services via VoIP, Voice over Internet Protocol. So, whether it's, all the big names, I'm not going to align myself to one particular VoIP package, but there are several. And people are going to reach out for that support because I feel that there's going to be a greater understanding of how important mental, emotional and spiritual health is to our physical well-being. So I think there is going to be a big expansion of those services. Now this is a big one. Saturn's going to push us all, whether it's through prescription drugs, whether it's illegal drugs, whether it's through substances of any kinds that we may feel, whether it's a glass of wine with our dinner at night, any substance which gives us an escapism, Saturn's going to ask us to check out why we want to do that. It's not saying it's always a bad thing to do those things, but just raise our awareness of why we'd want to do that. And that's Saturn pushing back on the escapist tendencies of Neptune, which have really caused a lot of issues since 2012. We have a proliferation of drugs on our streets and it's causing enormous social problems. So this is not a judgment on anyone taking a drug. It's about when we take the drug for the wrong reason in the wrong way. I also feel that things like spa health treatments, which are very popular, they're going to become a lot bigger. And I think more people are going to want to swim. But of course we need our rivers and our lakes and our seas to be safe to swim in. So we have had an enormous issue in Britain of effluent being pumped into the ocean and to rivers and runoff from agricultural fertilizers actually really affecting wildlife. We're seeing the water table being really affected in not a positive way. We're actually seeing a lot of very important natural habitats being destroyed. And I think there is going to be a pushback against the power that some of these water companies, which are driven by profit, the amount of power they've had. Now, I know in Europe there is much more regulation. Britain's left Europe and that's made things more difficult in terms of maintaining those safe waterways. But wherever we are in the world, it's going to become more of a hot topic. And of course we get all those particulates, those plastics in the ocean as well. So I think there's going to be a lot stricter regulation about that kind of stuff. Also, I feel that there's going to be more harvesting of sea crops. Now, I'm not sure if you're a fan of seaweed. It's really good. If you make a stew and you cut up a bit of seaweed, it's given some extra protein and it's a different type of protein. So it's interesting. Why not? We don't always have to be eating the same food options. Now, what about the challenges? Well, I feel that the rise in seawater that we've already got a problem with is going to get worse, and that is going to threaten low-lying islands even more severely, sadly. But also we've got the erosion of coastlines, and that could be in places that are less low-lying. So that is something that I feel is going to be an issue. The challenges also are the lack of those strict regulations in terms of how our waterways are used, and that needs to be addressed. I think there could be some aquatic diseases that spring out. The increase of chemicals into nature as a whole, because if we think of chemicals, I think very much of Neptune, to be honest, because it's not always it's not visible at all, just like COVID wasn't. But Jupiter, of course, expands. It's a very amplifying energy through its rulership of the sign of Sagittarius. So I feel that whether it is through toxins getting into the air or getting into the water or getting into our skin through products. Now, I don't know if you know about the scandal with anti-stick cookware, but I personally wouldn't use it if it was the last thing on the planet, because that stuff puts toxins in you that you cannot get rid of. So do your own research on that, but that type of stuff is really causing a big increase in cancers. And remember, Neptune, very hard to actually see things, so Jupiter expands. And also, I feel there will be the erosion of the value and also the trading performance of businesses that show no care and compassion either to their consumers or their staff. So I feel that we're seeing a revolution, which obviously will come a lot from Pluto's arrival in Aquarius, but that revolution is about creating an environment literally where people can feel safe, they can feel emotionally secure to perform a task, to work hard, to give of themselves, because the sign of Pisces can be very much about sacrifice, and the planet Saturn can be very much about application and hard work. So this is why I don't feel that we should see Saturn in Pisces as being a very binary thing, as all bad against Jupiter's all good. The other thing with Saturn in Pisces is that Pisces energy is very ephemeral. Saturn's very much to do with shaping things. So even if we have a good idea, it doesn't matter whether we're an artist or a musician, a sculptor, we still have to have some kind of structure, form and function. So when people have Saturn conjunct Neptune, for example, in a natal horoscope, they can actually be often brilliant at things like architectural services or artistry itself, because they can get the balance. Graphic design is another example of getting things structured but in a creative way. So Saturn gives us the opportunity to do that too. Okay, so when the event occurs is at 1:35 p.m. Universal Central Time. Because this is a very slow moving planet, I've just done it on Universal Central Time. And when that event occurs, obviously Saturn itself in Pisces, so I'm sharing on the screen now, thinking about the zodiac wheel starting at 0 degrees Aries, Saturn's in the 12th house of psychology. But you can see Mercury is pretty close by, 8 degrees. Mercury, yes, is in detriment in the sign of Pisces. So our thinking and our expression around emotions can be stifled by both those things. The inhibition of Saturn and the shyness, but also because our message can get lost because Mercury is affected by the mutability and the emotion of Pisces, because Mercury likes clarity. It's about ideas. But you can see the sun is at 16 degrees. And guess what? The moon on the other side of the heaven in the sign of Virgo. So yes, as this occurs, so we have a full moon in the sign of Virgo. And this is really, really fascinating, because obviously the moon in Virgo is very much about the practical domain. It's about physical well-being, it's about organisation, neatness and tidiness, particularly in the home. But the sixth house where it resides in terms of the overall chart we can all relate to, very much about those things. But the sun in the 12th house of psychology, spirituality, endings, it can be about reflection and withdrawal. We also have Neptune, the co-ruler of the sign of Pisces, there too, also in house 12. And this is really important. It's squaring up with Mars in Gemini in house 3. So ideas have developed a distortion, or the sharing of ideas have developed a distortion in recent years, which is just absolutely extraordinary. And I know there is that saying that everybody is entitled to their own truth, but I think we can expect through Saturn's journey in the sign of Pisces a lot of distortion of reality. And because Mars is in the quick-fire Gemini, it's quite urgent, it's a hasty kind of energy, and Neptune square Mars is one of the most draining and distorting of influences, bar none. So we need to be aware that our reality may be challenged over the next couple of years. What's the good stuff? Well, Jupiter and Chiron are pretty well conjunct. There's less than 1 degree between them. When Chiron is conjunct Jupiter, it can boost us up. It can see us try to obscure where we feel a little bit frail and vulnerable. But in the first solar house, it's very much about the body and it's about our identity. And Venus is in the mix as well. So Venus, Jupiter and Chiron, if we can embrace within ourselves a kinder way of being. I know Venus is detrimented in the sign of Aries, but I think it also is about initiative and initiative around relationships. So if we reach out to people and we try to open up the whole discussion around how we feel about things, make that part of our everyday way of feeling and being, that's going to be very healing. But because of that full moon, there is, if you like, a kind of a seesaw between the potential that the position of the sun has and the potential of the moon. So we've got to try and find a way to integrate in order to deal with that energy over the next couple of years. So I thought that was a really fascinating thing. Also, you can see right at the bottom in house 5 is the ascendant, which is in Leo, and you can see right up in house 10 we have Pluto late, really late on the anaretic point in Capricorn, preparing to go into Aquarius on the 23rd, but that's an opposition. So in other words, our relationships are going to be very intense because Pluto is on the descendant. You know, we can't escape that. So I feel that there are some challenges there to finding the balance between the physical world, how we see our reality, and also the spiritual world, and kind of accepting that they are all one of the same holistic round. You know, if we want to live outside of a contact with our inner being, our senses, our instincts, we want to live in the world of hard proven science. Hey, how about that? So much science is based on theories. And then suddenly, we now realise that actually what we've been saying for the last 150 years about so-and-so, we've now realised that's wrong. But astrology is always held to a higher level of accountability. It seems to me astrology doesn't claim to be a science. It is an art, but it is, if we strip out the instinctive side of it, really astronomy. So I think it's important to not let that Virgo moon dominate how we're going to be through Saturn's journey through the sign of Pisces. So in other words, we need to allow ourselves to feel frail, to feel vulnerable, but find the safe ways to share that with others, but also find some really important ways to try to heal some of the mess the world is in. So now on the screen you can see the event chart of the ingress based on Placidus and again on Universal Central Time. What's the big takeout from this? Well, if you know your astrology, you'll know it's Saturn in the 8th house. That's not easy. Saturn in the 8th house can really ask us to scrutinise underneath the surface in a very profound way. And obviously the 8th house can be about ends, but it also can be about beginnings. So I feel that Saturn moving into this position, in some ways, could be a pushback. This is not really my personal view, but it's something that I think some people could speculate. A pushback against certain more traditional religions. But I also feel that Saturn being in the 8th house could be limitation financially. So that's what we could expect over the next couple of years. But then in the 10th house, right at the top of the chart, how we connect to the world at large, the two planets of fortune are within touching distance. And, sandwiched either side, sandwiched in between them, either side, we have Chiron and those two guys either side. Also, there's a lovely link between the position of Saturn and also the North Node, which, again, the North Node in the 10th house is asking us to be grown up about how we use resources. So the 8th house could be about becoming much more aware that every time we have a resource, it drains out the earth or it drains out the ocean. So we just need to be conscious of that. But the sun is in house 9 and the full moon is in house 3. So that whole thing about people having lots of different opinions, not being so prepared to listen, not really having a discussion. It is very polarized. It's my view or no view, or you're cancelled. And that seems to be something that is going to continue. Also, you can see that Neptune's in the 9th house and Mars in the 11th of the collective, but Neptune in the 9th house, the potential for distortion and misrepresentation with that particular influence is astonishingly high. But there is that pack of energy right at the top of this chart, and I think that although Pluto's on the descendant cusp, it's just in the 6th house, you can see the descendant itself is at 254, but it is definitely close enough to show its impact. Of course, the part of fortune is on the 7th house cusp in a very helpful way. So I feel that really Pluto's just saying that the Aquarian vibe that's coming through, first of all, from that glorious Aquarius new moon of the 21st of January, Venus combining with Saturn on the 22nd of January, Saturn moving out of Aquarius and into Pisces on today's event. But that's really going to test the mettle of all the development that's gone into the Aquarian energy of the last couple of years. But Pluto comes along on the 23rd of March to push on with those Aquarius agendas. So I feel that just about sums this up, this event. There are opportunities with Saturn moving through Pisces, but there are challenges. And it's very important that we allow the feeling, emotional and spiritual energies of Pisces to wash around us, and that we bend a little bit in our structures, that we're not so rigid, Saturn, that we can't allow them in. So we need to bend a little bit, flex in our reflections over the next couple of years and change our behaviour in order to be more protective of our resources, but also understand the value of meditation, of peacefulness, of listening to music, of walking in nature, of the things like the arts, of music, of higher vibrations, to welcome these things in and not be threatened by them. Now please stay with me as I go through each of the 12 zodiac signs to give you a flavour of what you can expect over the next 2 years. So Aries, it's an interesting one for you because I feel that there may be elements of your life or a relationship or an involvement or a friendship, the choice is yours, I'm not steering that you do actually decide to call time on over the next couple of years. It could happen as soon as this year, but it'd be because you're starting something that's much more sparkly, attractive and exciting. And the reason for that is that you have 2 new moons in your sign this year. The second is a really powerful solar eclipse. It is in a conjunction with Jupiter as well for growth. It is in a square with Pluto, which means there could be some challenges as you make a new beginning. But then on the 13th of July, the North Node moves into your sign as well. So as much as Saturn can speak to the potential for certain things coming into a period of closure, a stage is being set for you to power forwards in the most incredibly dynamic way. And obviously, Pluto moving into your 11th house of future plans, higher involvements, connecting with people who really share your values, That's also a very exciting development. So please don't see Saturn going through your 12th house as a sole event. The art of astrology is to balance many different influences and to get the most cogent theme. So the theme for you is that I do feel that something that has meant a lot to you could finish. Now, it could be a lifestyle way of doing things. It could be an interest. It could be a holiday destination. It could be a friendship, or it could be a love relationship. But it will all, any of those things, it will be your choice. And when you begin something new, it's going to be with a great sense of excitement. Will you go through a period of grieving? If it's something that's very important to you, yes. I'm not going to try to trivialize the separation in a long-standing relationship, for example. That's a very tough thing to go through. But the big picture is enormously exciting for you this year. And what Saturn's asking you to do is to work on your inner self. Don't ignore it. One of your great gifts is your instincts. Really listen to them very attentively in the next couple of years. So Taurus, Saturn moving into Pisces for you is house 11. What's the quality of your friendship circle like? Do they really respect you? Are you a little bored with some people? Are there some solid citizens that are always going to be there and you're realistic about them? They're going to stick around. But if there are other people around who are a bit more of the fair weather variety, because we do have a lot of 12th house energy coming in with 2 new moons, one a solar eclipse in Aries, and also the North Node moving from your sign back into Aries on the 13th of July, I think it may be around your longer term future that you're going to go into a period of reflection. You may not make any binding decisions this year, although you may. The choice will be yours, but I actually feel that what Saturn's asking you to do is to check out where you've been heading in your life. Have you been heading down a road that's based on particular goals and ambitions? Completely laudable, but do they really fulfill you? Or are you spending time on interests or connections with others that really are rock solid and actually give you a great sense of stability and a great sense of purpose? So we can be motivated by the material world, and I think Pisces is asking you to think about your spiritual dimension, and in a big way. So I don't think those good citizens are going to make way, but I think a few other friends or interests or activities, or previously what you felt were important goals and ambitions, could just melt away as you realise what your real life purpose is about. And I think that's what the next couple of years represents for you more than I think some other astrologers may mention. Now, Gemini, for you, obviously having Mars in your own sign as this event occurs is great, because it's giving you a lot of punchiness and a lot of thrust, but it is impacted by that Neptune position. And that means that how you connect to the wider world with Neptune, the Sun, obviously, and Mercury and Saturn, all in your 10th house as this event occurs, it seems to me that Saturn's going to ask you some big questions about what you do for a living, or how you connect to the wider world, what your goals and ambitions are. And I feel within the next 2 years, you will have made some major changes, some readjustments. The only reason you won't is if you're doing something at the moment which is completely fulfilling to you. If you are, Saturn's just going to reaffirm that and give you a greater sense of purpose and a greater sense of security. How lovely is that? But also, I think there's going to be a greater integration between your worldly responsibilities and also your friendships. And I think there can be some really lovely people that are going to be coming into your life, particularly over the rest of 2023. But you need to make sure that the trust issue is nailed down, because with Neptune squaring up with Mars in your sign, if there is anyone around you that you can't 100% rely upon, they're not the people that you need to be letting close to you. But your leadership qualities, your self-confidence, your ability to really set realistic goals is really going to be increased with the help of Saturn. Cancer. Now, Saturn moving into your 9th house, this would be a wonderful time for you to think about taking that languages course that you've always fancied doing, whether it's Spanish, whether it's Italian, French, Chinese. Apparently, one of the most widely spoken languages in the world is Mandarin. Whatever you decide to do, it would give you a huge boost, but you don't have to do a language course. You can do anything which widens your perspective. And it is true that with Saturn moving through this area, that you would have to work very hard to achieve what you'd want. But it could also be that you're not feeling completely fulfilled in terms of the intellectual stimulation that you're getting at the moment. Or it could be that there's something of a legalistic nature you're going to have to tackle over the next couple of years, and it could relate to something from your past because of Mars being in your 12th house, squaring with Neptune in the 9th house of justice. So the justice sector of your chart really is really influenced by Saturn. And of course, justice, the higher truth, is something that it's easy to talk about, but life can test us and it can test our integrity. What Saturn's saying to you is don't take shortcuts with anything to do with buying property overseas, leases and contracts, anything to do with foreign exchange deals. Go cautiously because of Saturn being in the 9th house. But if you really want to push yourself by moving to somewhere different, experiencing a completely fresh and more independent way of living, Saturn is really going to be there to support you as well as test you. So Leo, for you, Saturn moving into your 8th solar house is very much about where you're intimate, where you're most invested. It can be in an emotional or romantic context, or it can be in a financial one. So Saturn could ask you some questions over the next couple of years, but this would be a great time to think about the fundamentals of future provision. So that could be savings, it could be pensions, it could be creating a will if you don't have one. Take all these areas uber seriously with Saturn in this area. Because of course Mercury is in detriment and Neptune afflicts Mars. So some of the normal purposefulness you bring to situations needs to be watched and guarded against, so it's not in some way diminuted. Now we do have the Sun in a superb angle with Uranus, so if your ideas are more innovative and forward thinking, you could really do well. But of course, to get that kind of success takes a lot of commitment, hard work, perspiration, as well as the inspiration. But that's where Saturn comes in. So it just depends what you want. So whether you want to work on your romantic situation, a business, your personal finances, developing your property, whatever you want to work on around these areas, Saturn will support you, but it will also test you. But thinking outside the box can be a smart thing to do. Now Virgo, for you, of all the zodiac signs, I think the next couple of years is very much about your relationships. Your ruler is also in the sign of Pisces, along with Saturn. And of course, on this event, the moon is in your sign, which could see you seeing things much more from your perspective. But that's not a bad thing, because with all this 7th house energy, there can be a potential to lose our identity a little bit. So what Saturn's asking you to do is set boundaries. We know Saturn is about that, and it's really important for you, particularly with Neptune, in that drifting, dreamy part of your chart to do with relating. But Uranus is in a great link with the Sun, and if you're single, someone very, very different to you could come along and just absolutely enthrall you. But if this does happen, I feel that the relationship has to be quite serious. Although Uranus and the Sun could point towards a quick moving and not necessarily lasting romantic encounter, I feel because Saturn, Mercury, the Sun, Neptune are all in your 7th house, I think Saturn's going to prompt a yearning for the right kind of relationship where there's a good mutual respect and a give and take between both partners. Which brings us to Libra. Now, of course, Neptune has been in house 6 since 2012, and it has absolutely rinsed you at times. You've had to give it so much to support other people's needs. What about yours? Saturn moving into the 6th house is saying you need to look after your physical well-being. So that means not just eating the food that's easily cooked in the microwave. It means looking at the ingredients, making stuff from scratch where possible. Virtue is going to be important to you over the next couple of years. Now, you can ignore what I say or even be cross with me, but Saturn will then cause issues. So in other words, any kind of excess at all, and of course, you know I've got a Libra ascendant at 23 degrees. We love the calorific goodies, the sweet tooth, and it's easy to sort of just keep spoiling ourselves. And I mean, I found some dates yesterday dipped in chocolate. I mean, come on, I had to demolish them. But Saturn's going to come along and say, "Oi, what are you doing? You need to make sure that you're going for a walk after eating those dates, Arundell, and make sure it's a brisk walk at that. And if you can, run for the bus or get your bike. Try and not be lazy." So Saturn is bringing in some a little bit of stiffening up of resolve, to be honest. I think Libran people, if not really mentally engaged or not engaged by interaction with people, can switch out and be a little bit, prone to just take it easy. And really Saturn's saying over the next couple of years, gotta be much more on the front foot with what you eat, the amount of exercise you get, and also finding satisfaction in life. Because if you are going to give to people, say through your work, make sure it's a job that you find gratifying and you feel respected and appreciated. But the smaller details, which can be a little bit boring, are going to become more important over this next couple of years. Which brings us to Scorpio. So, Scorpio, for you, Saturn moves into your 5th house, and a lot of people will be sucking the breath in through their teeth. Oh, Saturn in the 5th house, you're not going to have much fun with that. Do you know, one of the things I find in my consultant business is every time Saturn moves across a house cusp or an important angle with a client, something really significant can happen, and it can often be really good. So if you want a romantic relationship in your life, if you want to have children, if you want to make the most of your creative talents, and you're not satisfied with what you have at the moment, Saturn's saying, right, there you go. It's up to you now to roll your sleeves up and give it everything, because it's that wholehearted commitment which you really do understand, which is going to bring rewards for you. But because of the full moon on this event, the moon's in the part of your situation to do with you liking a bit of freedom and liking your friends. So you've got some choices to make. And of course your ruler Mars, traditional, is conflicted by Neptune. And also your modern ruler is at the other end of the ascendant, the descendant. And that position of the ascendant is the 10th house, how you connect with the wider world. And Pluto therefore is on your 4th house. So for example, if you are wanting to have that binding relationship where you move in with someone, make a really lovely, secure home, have an addition to your family, this set of influences can be really great as long as you can sacrifice a little bit of your personal independence. Now, of course, if you're in a romantic relationship and it isn't giving you everything you need, I feel one of the challenges may be that you actually really fancy the person quite a bit, or perhaps you really fancy someone, but you're getting hugely mixed signals. Because Mars in your 8th house of lust, is being conflicted so badly by Neptune, your head may be spinning about what the other person wants. Or it could be you're about to meet that person who's rather baffling. So what Saturn's saying to you is scrutinise them, set your boundaries, tell them what you need. If that person doesn't have the same set of motivations as you, be philosophical about it. Because every minute we're with someone who's not right for us is a minute that we can't meet the person who is right for us. And of course that person will never be perfect any more than any of us can be perfect. But someone who's more perfect for you is out there if you're patient. And obviously Saturn is very much about patience. So don't see Saturn in the 5th house as being an absolutely bad thing. It is most certainly not. Sagittarius. Well, Sagittarius, one of the things that I always think about with your sign is that you have such innate enthusiasm, you're so bubbly. Obviously this event chart's got Jupiter and Venus in a wonderful cuddle in your 5th house of love and romance. But for love and romance to really thrive for you, you need to have the emotional side of things, the security, the place to live or to coexist. That needs to be sorted out. And you can find all that stuff very, very dull, because for you, you want to have a big experience all the time. And what Saturn's saying to you is you're going to have to work to get this structure in place to give you the opportunity to really thrive in a much more emotionally fulfilling way. So when stuff happens with Sagittarius people, there can be a tendency to say, oh well, that happens, I'm not bothered, I'm going out with so-and-so, I'm doing this. That kind of bigging it up stuff is really not going to work in the next couple of years. So you may as well call a halt on it now and accept that just like everyone else, and Neptune has been trying to inform you of this since 2012, you have feelings. You're vulnerable at times. And you can feel isolated and lonely. The 4th house position of Saturn is not easy. If you've got weaknesses in the structure of your family, they could be revealed over the next couple of years. But equally, you can find a new structure that makes things much more stable for you. It just depends on seeing it, accepting that it's okay to be vulnerable. You know, and if you can't be vulnerable with some of the people that are in your life at the moment, find people you can be yourself with, because that's what it's really about, being ourselves in the totality. If we can only be that person who wants to maintain that veneer of success, authority, of being unconcerned with life's trivialities, you know, it just isn't real. So I think it's reality that you're needing at the heart of your world in the next couple of years. Strings as Capricorn, of course, Saturn is your only ruler. And having moved into the 3rd house, it's about the shaping of ideas. Neptune's given you huge amounts of ideas over the last years, since 2012. You know, if you're very good at photography, at artwork, at music, at anything that's expressive, you've probably really done well. But Saturn's asking you now to think about maybe something that's been a hobby and starting to take it more seriously. If that's something that you don't want to do, it could be that you need to rethink in some ways some of your belief systems, 3rd house, and also the way you communicate with people, because you're going to find over the next couple of years that people could be quite picky about some things that you say, and you could find that quite disconcerting. I think the vibe immediately around you, whether it's in your locality, in your neighbourhood, you're going to need to work at those relationships. People may not accept you quite as automatically as they have in the past. And you could find yourself becoming more defensive if you're not careful. So the thing is to try to understand why. It may be that someone that you encounter or people you encounter feel that there's strands of dogmatism in your approach. And what the Pisces energy with Saturn's asking you to do is to flex, to let other people's viewpoints come in, to not feel that you have to be the dominant authority, which can be a factor with Capricorn people, to just be and see where it takes you, but be very fluid about ideas, because if you're not, I feel that it could cause you tensions. And of course, the third house is the nervous system. So very good to get the exercise and eat the nutrients to feed your nervous system well. Get loads of sleep. And also, don't overdo things with late nights. Third house, Saturn, will give you a nudge. Look, you need to look after yourself. So some weariness can creep in if you're not careful, but with the Sun in a glorious angle to Uranus, you can still have lots of sparkling conversations. You can still, have a great impact on people. I feel that you will rethink some of the way you are over the next couple of years, and what you emerge as could surprise you where you stand now once you get to where you stand then. So Aquarius, Saturn moves into your second solar house, and the big impact that Saturn can have here is about our sense of self-worth. So it's going to be important that you work at nurturing yours over the next couple of years. But equally, if you've been working on something more creative or different or dashing or inspirational in recent times, the chances are it can shape up and become something much more substantive in your life over this next couple of years. Because of the array of energy in the sign of Pisces, I think it can offset some of the tendency or potential that Saturn can have to choke off income. It may be that you just need to flex to develop new ways of earning money, but in the same field you work in now, perhaps by redeploying yourself, with the Sun in a great link to your modern ruler of Uranus, thinking outside the box, offering a service in your local community, working from home in a low-cost way in terms of what it's needed to support that enterprise, but in a very quick, responsive mode in terms of meeting people's needs, could see you doing really well. Also, with Venus and Jupiter, the two planets of fortune together in your third house, the way you express your ideas, your charm and persuasiveness can be really important to your prospects with Saturn moving into this new zone. But really, truly, it is about really believing more firmly of your value as a human being. That is the central thing Saturn's going to be asking you and me to work on over the next couple of years. It's also worth saying, of course, the second house, very Venusian, very Tauran, can be about being a little bit sort of keen on the seconds with dinner and so on. So Saturn's asking us to be a bit more disciplined about calorie consumption, which brings us to Pisces. So if you've read or heard stories about Saturn moving into your own sign, that it's going to be really, really tough, blah, 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 well, let me reassure you, Saturn, wherever it is, brings some challenges. That's just the fact. And because it's been in your 12th house for the last 2.5 years in total, that's about as hard as it gets. So what Saturn's been doing is asking you, particularly in that square with Uranus, the 12th, third house, you were so affected by everyone else's energy, everyone else's opinions. I think you've experienced some disloyalty, some dishonesty. I really think it's been quite tough the last couple of years. So, with all these planets in your sign, as this new adventure begins, be excited. But it is true you need to be clear-minded about an issue to do with where you want to live. If that's been something you cannot make your mind up about, and it may have been going backwards and forwards in your thinking since August the 20th when Mars went into Gemini, I don't think it's necessarily going to be completely resolved straight away, but you will start to get greater understanding from the 25th of March. But essentially, this is a time of new beginnings, but it's also a time of clearing out anything which no longer serves your greater purpose. That could be a job, it could be an interest, it could be a hobby, it could be some attitudes. And what Saturn asks us to do in our own sign is narrow our focus, because if we try to do too much, and your sign is a sign of great sacrifice, can really bend over backwards to assist those who are less fortunate. But there's a cost. You will need to look after yourself, because Saturn limits in the first house our body. So your energy is not going to be without some limitations. So you need to therefore focus the energy you do have on the things which are truly meaningful for you. But I actually think if you work hard financially, you're going to find some exciting developments for you over the next year for sure. So if you have something you're inspired by, it is a theme that's been ongoing for a while, but you prepare to inject more energy into it, or it is something fresh and new and different, it's the commitment, and that's what Saturn's asking you to do. Not spread yourself thin, narrow your focus, pour all your energies into the thing that's most meaningful for you, and you can really do well over the next 12 months. I hope that gives you a flavour of what Saturn will represent through all those zodiac signs. Please like, comment or subscribe if you've yet to do so. Thank you so much for joining me. All the best and goodbye for now.